So today we're doing another one on sort of leaving aside the complexities of method construction and conducting and that sort of thing in coursing order, and looking at a practical part of the world of ringing, and thinking about organisation of quarter peals, which I think is actually quite a useful thing to talk about, because we've I think it's helpful if we can think of things like quarter peals as something that we can sort of engage with independently, and that if there's something that you want to ring, then why not go ahead and try and organise it. I think there's a sort of caveat to that, which is that if at the tower where you ring, you've got somebody who already organises lots of quarter peals and that sort of thing, it's probably a good idea to talk to them first about that. If somebody organises a regular quarter peal for evensong or that sort of thing, then it's worth making sure that you chat to them first. But in general, I think it's helpful if we can think of things like quarter peals and peals as it's not just something that's in somebody else's control. We can take kind of control of our own ringing opportunities and organise our own stuff and make the progress that we want to make without having to sort of hit barriers of, well, I'm not getting asked into anything or that sort of stuff on occasions where that might happen. So I think it's a good thing to talk about, and when recreational ringing, shall we call it, resumes. I mean, it looks like Sunday service ringing might resume relatively soon, but when ringing tower bells for fun and ringing quarter peals and being in the tower for a long time is possible again, I'd really encourage you, if you don't organise quarter peals yet, to have a go at trying to organise one. So I was trying to think about what are the different elements that go into organising a quarter peal, and I'm going to try and break it down and go through lots of different steps and stages. Some of it might sound really obvious, other things, maybe there are some things that are new and that are more helpful, but that's kind of where we're coming from. One thing I just emphasize, I've put a few random pictures on the front of this slide. One thing I would emphasize is think about where you're going to ring, because, for example, if you were going to go to a town like this one, this is a picture of Wheathampstead, which has one of the longest drafts, unguided drafts in the country. There's 30 foot of rope to that stage, so it's quite difficult ringing there, I understand. I haven't actually been there, but I understand it's quite difficult. Think about, like, who you're going to ask, and that will be affected by various different things, one thing of which is what's the tower like. So I was sort of saying there's lots of different factors to think about, I think, when organising a quarter peal, and possibly is a bit similar to the sorts of things you'd think about when organising an outing. There is some crossover between this talk and the one I gave on outing organising back in April. There's lots of different factors to think about. I think the thing to start with really is, what is it for? The why of this quarter peal or peal that you might be organising. What is it that you're ringing for? And we'll look at that in a bit more detail in a moment, but that could be all sorts of different things. So you might be ringing for a service, or you might be ringing for somebody's first in something. It might be something that's really important to be successful in. And so I think if you start by thinking about, well, what is this quarter peal for? Then that obviously leads to the question of, well, how important is it that you ring this quarter successfully, and that you get from the beginning of the quarter, starting in rounds, and you ring 1,260 or more changes, and it comes back into rounds at the end successfully. The importance that you place on actually being able to score it successfully kind of affects these other things, I think. So it would obviously affect your choice of method, because if you think it's really important to score the quarter peal successfully and for the ringing to be really accurate all the way through, then you would choose something simpler. If the quarter peal is more about thinking about what you're ringing for, if the quarter peal is more about ringing a first in something for somebody, or as a whole band having a go at a new method, then maybe the importance that you attach to being successful might be a bit lower, so you might be a bit more adventurous with the choice of method, for example. It also obviously affects who you ask into the quarter peal, partly because you might be wanting to choose people who are going to ring their first in something, but also because if you're thinking, for example, you want to ring somebody's first quarter peal, you're going to want to have, if you can, quite a strong band around that person to help out and to make sure that they're not going wrong and making it harder for that person doing their first in a particular thing, for that particular quarter peal. When you're thinking about the band, you'll be thinking about who you're going to ask to call the quarter peal. And again, that's sort of affected a bit by how important it is to ring it successfully and to ring it well and to get good striking and to be able to deal with the method mistakes if they come up. You know, who you ask to call it is kind of dependent a bit on the level of importance you attach to being successful. Similarly, the sort of practical issues around where you go to ring. So it might just be your home tower where you know the bells pretty well, but it could be that you're going somewhere else. It could be you're organising a quarter peal day and going for 2 or 3 or more quarter peals at different towers. And if you're doing that, you're going to want to think, well, how heavy are these bells? How long's the draft? Are they easy to handle? What do I know about these bells already? Some of it you can see on Dove, other things aren't necessarily so obvious. And that's going to affect who you ask into the band as well, isn't it? And your choice of method. If you've got a really heavy ring of 6 or ring of 8, you might want to ring doubles or triples with the tenor ringing behind all the time, to make the tenor ringer's life easier than ringing an even bell method where the tenor has to be turned in and moved around in the change. If you're going to a really heavy ring of bells, then who you ask into your quarter peal might be different. You'll want some people who are experienced at ringing heavier bells, if you're going to want to score the quarter peal successfully. And there are other things as well, aren't there? So if you want to go on a quarter peal day, you might want to ring at a few different varied towers, have some unusual architectural features or rare towers or towers with a good pub in the village or town. It might be that you want towers that are easy to get to, you know, with good public transport links, of plenty of parking, that sort of thing. So I think the first thing I wanted to sort of put this diagram up because I think it is a fairly complex business, actually, organising quarter peals. There's lots of different things that you might have to think about, and actually some of it probably is sort of subconsciously thought about to be like, well, no, obviously we can't ring that method with this band or on those bells, so obviously we're going to ring something simpler, but or we've got an opportunity here to ring something harder, so let's do it. You know, some of it might just be stuff you wouldn't necessarily think about but would just do, but I think it's helpful to break it down. So it's a complicated picture and there's lots of different things to think about, and actually all of these different things kind of interact with each other, I think, as I've sort of demonstrated. The why are you ringing kind of affects all of those other things, and the band affects the choice of the method. Choice of method affects who you ask into the band. The method might be affected by the bells, the tower. So there's actually quite a lot of different things to think about, and it's, you know, moderately complicated, I guess. Let's just start with saying a bit more about this sort of first stage. What is the purpose? What is this quarter peal for? And we've got, as I've said, a range of different people on this talk. So we've got some people who've run lots of quarter peals and organised lots of quarter peals, and some people who haven't run many quarter peals. So we've got a real range of attendees here. I guess the thing to think about is, as I say, why is this quarter peal happening? Why am I organising this quarter peal? So it could be several of these things all at once, actually, but these were the ones that occurred to me. You might have other things that you might want to contribute in the chat box, but is this a quarter peal that's for being rung for service ringing, so for evensong or something like that? is it a first for somebody? So someone's first quarter peal, or first in a particular method, first as conductor, those sorts of things. Is it marking an important occasion? So like an anniversary of something, or the Queen's birthday, or any other thing, historic or personal, important occasion, birth of a grandchild. It could be any number of things. Is it just really purely for a social get-together? So in Bromley, before lockdown, we used to have a Friday evening quarter peal once a month, where we were ringing sort of surprise major methods, and that was largely a sort of social and trying to do different things, ring different methods, but social because we'd go to the pub afterwards, go for a curry, that sort of thing. Could it be that you're practicing for a peal, so you're trying to maybe ring a section of the composition that you're wanting to go for, or you're just kind of getting used to ringing for a longer period of time, ready to then look at having a go at your first peal attempt, perhaps. Or you could be practicing for a striking competition, actually. I was talking about striking competitions last week, and bands that do a lot of preparation for things like the National 12 Bell do tend to do things like ringing quarter peals or even peals with their band ringing the bells that they're going to ring in the competition itself. So, it can be quite a helpful way to practice for a striking competition. Might be that you just want to ring a new method, so maybe the whole band are going to have a first in method, or someone's come up with a completely new method, and you want to ring that. And these sorts of questions then affect what you do next, don't they? Because if you are ringing for service, and perhaps, let's say, for service ringing and to mark an important occasion, then it's quite important probably to score the quarter peal successfully and to have good striking all the way through. Now, that's important anyway, but it's probably particularly important when we're ringing for services, isn't it? And so what you choose to ring might be slightly more on the simpler side of things within, relative to the capability of the band. And the band, you ask, might well be quite an experienced one. So you'd be thinking about, for that sort of quarter peal, it's important to have good ringing, it's important to score it successfully, get a strong band, and then think, okay, so this is the limit of the capability of the band, whatever that is. I want to just go a little bit below that limit so that it's something that's safe and it's scoreable and is going to generate good striking. If it's somebody's first, you'll obviously want to score it, and you'll want to have good ringing, and you'll want to have a strong band around that ringer or ringers ringing their first in a particular thing. But actually, you can always organise another one, so it might not be so important to get it first time. I think it's important for everyone to remember that there's not all quarter peals will be rung successfully. Sorry, when I'm saying score a quarter peal, I mean ring it successfully, so get to the end where it comes back into rounds after the right number of changes and without any catastrophic mistakes. That's what I mean when I say scoring the quarter peal. So these questions around what's the purpose of the quarter peal obviously affect what you do next in terms of your organisation. So I think the first step is think about, what am I ringing this for? Why am I organising this quarter peal? And then everything you do after that kind of feeds off that decision about what the purpose is of ringing this particular quarter. Then you've kind of got three things to do. There's deciding what you're going to ring, booking the tower, and getting the band. Now, you can't ring a quarter peal without a tower, so I think it's probably best, well, you could ring handbell quarters, which is what's going on lots at the moment with no access to towers. But you can't ring a tower bell quarter peal without tower bells, so you need to book a tower. It may be that that's quite easy. So it could be that you're organising it at your home tower, and you're going to organise it for, you're going to coincide this particular thing you want to ring or ring for with ringing for an evening service. And in that case, it's probably fairly straightforward to just make sure that it's in the church diary through the sort of usual channels at your own tower, and book it and then organise it. You'll want to do that in plenty of time, though, because churches' plans could change. It could turn out that there's before the evening service, there's something else going on, a rehearsal or something that means it's not possible. So it's worth doing that in plenty of time. We have an arrangement at Bromley where we were ringing quarter peals basically for each evensong, choral evensong, which was once a month, and everyone sort of knew that, so that worked fine. If you're booking a tower that's not your home tower, then again, as I've sort of said, you'll want to think about the weight of the bells, the go of the bells, the length of the draft. Is it a ground floor ring? Are they going to have to be really long ropes that will make it harder? Are they known for being easygoing bells or hard-going bells? That sort of thing. And previous visits might help give you that sort of information. In terms of the actual process, though, to go through for booking a tower, you'll want to look at finding a tower, so you can use something like Dove's Guide to do that, and you'll want to know where that is, and then looking either in an association handbook or on a guild or association website for contact details for that tower. This slightly duplicates what I talked about in the outing talk, but I'm just going to show through kind of how to do that in a moment. Anyway, and you'll want to think a bit about things like the provision of post quarter peal refreshments, I would say, as well. Just quickly thinking about the booking of towers. So this is Dove's Guide for Church Bell Ringers, a website which is going to go through considerable improvement over the next year or so. It's really good resource already. It's going to get even better with help from Dick and Love, who's a Bromley ringer who is organising Dove's Guide at the moment. Here is a search I did earlier. I just looked up Rutum, a very fine ring of 8. Some say one of the finest rings of 8. And sort of, if we were looking at a tower like this, I mean, you'd want to think, this is a 20 hundredweight ring of 8, so a ton ring of 8. You'd want some quite experienced ringers to ring these back bells, probably. When you click on a tower, you get the option to have a look at a map. So in terms of organising quarter peal days, this is a really useful resource for just seeing quickly and visually what are the other towers around that area, and is really helpful. When you're actually on the page for that tower, you can get directed to various different things. So the Kent County Association, the really good, this is Dick and Love's website about Church Bells of Kent, which has lots of extra information that, like incredible amounts of information. He's done the same thing for the City of London as well. But anyway, so you get links to websites, including the association usually, or guilds that tower's a part of. And then those websites tend to have information about contact details for the tower. So on the Kent website, you can get to an A to Z list of towers, and then go to, for example, Bromley, and then get details about the tower, and hopefully contact details as well. So things like getting hold of an email address, etc. So that's the sort of process for getting a tower. Yeah, if you're not booking your own tower, and as I say, that sort of affects what you do next in terms of inviting a band. You'll want to think about that kind of balance between successfully ringing the quarter peal and giving people new opportunities. So the balance between having people who are ringing their firsts in particular things and having people who are experienced and who you know can ring whatever it is, to sort of help, strengthen the band. In some cases, you'll have a band that can learn new methods and just ring them, and that's fine. But if you've got a couple of people who are saying, so you're going to have two people who are going to ring their first quarter peal and playing Bob minor, you'll want to make sure that you've got the other four people are quite solid, who won't go wrong and cause problems for these people who are trying really hard to stay right and to ring well in this particular method. So have a think about that balance within the band, and deciding what you're going to ring first is generally helpful because that affects who you ask. If it's a sort of case of, well, I'm going to ask a band that can ring most surprise major methods, then you might want to decide later as a whole band, well, okay, this is what we're going to ring. But generally decide what it is that you want to ring, and then think, okay, so I'm going to ask these people who I know will be able to help. It's worth doing this in plenty of time, usually. I mean, sometimes you can organise a quarter peal really quickly. You know, you can phone people up, you can text them, set up a WhatsApp or Facebook group if everyone's into modern technology. But yeah, in general, asking people in plenty of time, because not everyone will reply straight away. Some people might never reply to emails. So it's worth just kind of giving it a bit of time. So a few weeks, a month, maybe. Again, that depends a bit on what you want to do. You know, if you really, really need these particular ringers in order to ring a certain thing, then you'll want to make sure that you ask them in lots of time, actually, because people tend to get booked up otherwise. Think about the bells that you've got and think about asking people who are going to be able to handle those bells. As I've said, not everyone will reply straight away. If you do have to chase, then probably best not to send an email saying, you haven't replied to my email, how dare you, please get back to me as soon as possible. You know, it's better to be polite. I wonder whether you received my email, you know, using tact and diplomacy and that sort of thing. At that stage, you also want to think about who you're going to ask to call the quarter peal, to put the bobs in and to take responsibility for keeping people right, addressing striking issues, that sort of thing. It's quite a big job, actually, conducting quarter peals and peals. So, you know, again, you'll want to think similarly about choosing the band, that balance. So if you've got a really strong band, you might want to say, okay, so I'm going to give somebody a chance to call something that they haven't done before. If it's not such a strong band, you'll want to think, okay, I want a really experienced conductor who can help sort of shepherd everyone through this quarter peal to a successful conclusion. So there's various different things to think about there, I think. When it comes to the actual day of the quarter peal, so when the actual quarter peals is going to happen. First thing to emphasize, I'll put a couple of pictures up from the outing talk. If you're going to an unusual different tower, you could get locked out. Somebody might not come and meet you. You could encounter mechanical problems, like the stays might break or a rope might snap. Just kind of be prepared for that. There are all sorts of reasons why you can lose quarter peals. In fact, these are probably some of the best stories in ringing for random reasons why people have lost quarter peals, for all sorts of different things that could happen. I think there was a story on one of the Bell Ringers Facebook pages recently about a band who lost a quarter peal that they were ringing at a ground floor tower on a hot summer's day, a bit like this last week, with the doors into the churchyard open. And about halfway through, one of the ringers was sort of launched into the tower. He was the one standing by the door, suddenly launched into the tower, and behind him there was an angry goat that had headbutted him, and therefore they lost the quarter peal. So, you know, unusual things can happen, unexpected things can happen. The best laid plans and the best organised quarter peals, where you've thought about all of these different things really carefully, who's going to conduct it, the band, the method, the location, all of these arrangements can go wrong, and you can have people not turning up. You can have ringers forgetting to come. You can have people forgetting to turn up to let you in. You can have mechanical failure. You can have angry goats headbutting your ringers. There are all sorts of stuff. There are all sorts of things that can go wrong, and it's worth accepting that. And if stuff does go wrong, just sort of taking a deep breath and going, okay, so things go wrong sometimes. Just need to kind of take that on the chin. It's part of organising quarter peals. You can obviously do things to minimise that, like reminding the tower contact, reminding the ringers to turn up, that sort of thing. But it's worth staying, relaxed about the fact that you might not score the quarter peal for all sorts of reasons. But let's say you turn up, you get access to the tower really easily, the bells go fine, the band are on form, the conductor doesn't miscall it while ringing. They get to the end of the quarter peal, it comes into rounds, and you've done it. There's a couple of things to think about. So I mentioned about sort of post-quarter peal refreshments. So it's nice to say, keep ringing social. I think it's really important, the social side of ringing. So saying, okay, so we'll go to the pub afterwards. You'll want to make a donation to the tower. And they might have a set donation, a set amount that they would request, or it might be that you get to give as much as you think the bells were worth, or that sort of thing. You will want the conductor to do what's called sending it up, so posting the quarter peal on Bellboard, the Ringing World's website for recording quarter peals, peals and other performances. That's a screenshot of what it looked like this morning on the list page of quarter peals, peals and other stuff. Obviously it's all handbell performances at the moment, outdoor handbell performances and things like that. Put it on Bellboard, send it to the Ringing World, and making a donation to the Ringing World. It's a really important income stream for this journal that's I think really important to ringers actually, and that's really been proven to be the case during lockdown, I think, in terms of communication between ringers. And quarter peal donations are important to the Ringing World, so I think it's good to collect that in. They suggest 50p per ringer. As the organizer, it's worthwhile making sure that you collect the tower donation money from the ringers and the Bellboard Ringing World money from the ringers as well. Otherwise, you can find that you end up having to foot the bill yourself. So, just kind of as a final summary, I've taken that mind map I showed you at the start and turned it into a bit of a flow chart, because I think actually the way in which all these things interact with each other and affect each other is sort of better depicted here. So in summary, think about, well, what are you ringing for? What's the aim? That affects how important it is to ring it successfully. Then it also, both these questions affect which tower you go to, easy or hard bells, what sort of band you select, who you ask into your quarter peal, who you choose to conduct it, and the method selection. These things kind of interact with each other. Method selection might come first before band selection, or it might not. The band selection needs a mixture of capable back bell ringers, front bell ringers. The conductor, that sort of feeds into the choice of composition, which is a different issue, which I haven't really touched on, but alongside the method, there's the kind of complexity of the composition. If it's spliced, so with more than one method, a simpler option is to not have many changes between methods. A more complicated option is to have lots of changes between methods, because then ringers are having to switch between different things really frequently. The conductor also sort of does the placing of the band, so who's going to ring which bell and that sort of thing. So a general sort of summary, 5 top tips. I think it's important to emphasize, like, don't be afraid to ask for help from experienced organizers, from other towers, asking ringers from other towers, remembering we're all one ringing community and each tower isn't just a sort of an island entire of itself. That you want to think about why you're ringing, so what's the purpose of this quarter peal, and then that affects what you ring and who you ask into it. You want to ask a band that are capable of ringing the method and ringing the bells that you've booked. ask people in plenty of time. Not everyone will be able to do it, so have a bit of a backup plan about, okay, so I'd like these 6 people, these 5 people to come and ring with me in this court appeal. But if these 2 people can't do it, then I've got other people that I can ask, perhaps. Or if I really want those 5 people, well, we'll have a look at a different date, perhaps. And afterwards, don't forget to collect the donation money for the tower for the ring world. Otherwise, you'll end up having to foot the bill yourself, which I had to do on a couple of occasions through forgetfulness. So any questions, do just ask. That's our quick tour of organising court appeals and things to consider. I hope that's given plenty to think about. And yeah, we'll take a bit of time for questions now.